to everyone for the UMA community call. We've had to move to a private link after a few problems last week. So if you know of people that are looking to join the call, then contact one of the admins and they'll give you the link. We've got quite a lot of pull requests to get through today, and we're going to take the UMIPs in reverse order. Also, pull request 232 is going to be delayed. The team have requested that they push it back until the following week. So we won't be considering pull request 232. So if I can just share my screen, and we'll take the UMIPs in reverse order. So the first one we'll start with is WIP Add Cryptopunk Index UMIP. So that's 261. There we go. Yeah, there was a couple of issues with this. It needs a price feed identified, but John, I think you're actually on the case of that, aren't you?
Yeah, so I'm working on that this week. And the initial one should be pretty straightforward because it's self-referential until expiry. So what we need is something for after expiry.
Super. Okay, well, that's good. So that's just a contingency. The other thing that I was slightly concerned about was that the two security issues that were identified. Sorry.
Side note, did we invite Chase to this meeting? Should I try to ping him and see if he wants to join?
Yeah, I think that's
probably
yes,
a good idea, yeah.
Yes. Thanks.
What security issues were you talking about, Corey?
Well, I don't know where my comment's gone. I left a comment earlier today, but it seems to have vanished. There's two security issues that have been raised. One is token price manipulation, and one is TWAP mismatch. And I was just a bit concerned that if both of those happened at the same time, how would we actually determine broad market consensus? Because as I understand it, it could suddenly rise or suddenly fall, creating a mismatch in the TWAP price. But there could also be token price manipulation. And trying to distinguish those two seemed to me to be quite difficult.
Well, I don't really think they're like distinct issues. Like, I think the TWAP mismatch could happen as a result of the token price manipulation.
I was more suggesting that there was a genuine TWAP mismatch and there was also token price manipulation at the same time. So we identified manipulation, but we weren't able to see what was manipulation and what wasn't. Am I just being over picky?
I guess I just don't really understand the concern.
Okay, maybe it's not such a big concern as I thought it might be.
So the TWAP mismatch would happen if there's like a sudden and sustained rise in price. So people could mint and sell off at like the current spot price while really being under collateralized by what like the future TWAP would be. But using like a relatively short period of 2 hours kind of makes that unlikely. And if a lot of people do that, then the TWAP actually won't have them be under collateralized. So it's not that much of an issue. And something that was like brought up in previous self-referential UMIPs. Yeah.
Okay. In that case, are there any other issues that people want to bring up there? I saw there was a mention of wrapped CryptoPunks. But otherwise, I think we're good to go with a conditional on price feed. Are people good with that?
Yes, that I think was comment about separating it out in 2 price IDs, so that's going to be possible?
It's been separated out into 2 price IDs.
Oh, yeah.
It's 1 UMIP, but 2 price IDs.
Okay, cool.
It's actually like, so these aren't issues, but just 2 things to highlight here. Like, this is the first time the new price identifier template has been used. And personally, I think it worked out a lot better. Like, it's a lot simpler. Also, this is like a great model for other self-referential price IDs to follow, because it's separating the 2 price identifier, separating the price identifier into 2. And then the intention is to use the financial product library to actually change what the requested price identifier is at expiry, rather than relying on this like baked in logic within the UMIP, which is, you know, a much, we think it's like a much cleaner method to do this.
Cool.
How do we know the token that, I mean, I guess this just shows like a little bit of me not understanding the history here, but how do we generally know what token we're trying to reference? Like in the self-referential price, like is the address of the token put into the UMIP after the fact?
Yeah.
Or something after it's launched? Okay.
Yeah, after the fact.
Okay.
Probably in the future, this is like a good use case for ancillary data, I would think.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. Yeah, it seems like a much more elegant solution. So this one is Go, but contingent on price feed.
When we say price feed, does that mean we need to write, somebody needs to write a price feed?
I think John's doing that at the minute.
And it's just it's just for expiry, right? You said, John?
Yeah, the post expiry.
Okay, cool.
Excellent. Good. The next one was the constant price identifier. As far as I could see, that one was pretty much good to go. All the issues seem to have been resolved. Anyone got any comments on the constant price identifier? This is using auxiliary data. Do you want to speak to it, Sean, or are you happy?
I'm happy with it, but I wrote it, so I don't know if that means much. I guess, Matt, you left a comment asking about like if the value within ancillary data should be scaled to 18 decimals. I said no, but like, do you think there's any advantage to scaling it here?
So I think my question is like, does it get scaled? Like, when does it get scaled? Like, if you put 2 in, what number does the contract see? Does it see 2 or 2 followed by 18 zeros?
I think within ancillary data, you would just see 2, but then when you put the price in, it would be 2 followed by 18 zeros, like any other price ID is handled. But like,
so we're
that's
implicitly
currently
scaling
abstracted.
these.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. But like, since the contract is putting in this ancillary data, like I think it is like there is a definitely question as to, do you want this to be the identity where the contract puts in 2 and it gets back the exact same number it puts into ancillary data? Or do you think contracts would expect it to be scaled once they get it back? Because you can almost imagine it like this price ID is literally a function that the contract is calling. It's calling a function, and you call a function called constant and you pass in a number, and then you might be surprised to see that you get a number back that is larger than the number you put in.
Okay, I can
I think
scale
the
it
scaling
then.
thing is.
Like, I
I'm not
don't
even
feel
arguing either
strongly one
direction.
way or the other.
Same. I don't feel super strongly either. I basically was just like I was almost kind of trying to fish for a strong argument for either side, and I don't see one.
Even if there's not a strong argument for either side, being explicit, I think, is helpful. So the fact that Matt had this question, I think, means something should be said in the UMIP.
Yep, I agree.
I mean, one problem, I think, actually, maybe this is a strong argument. One problem with it being scaled is that this means you cannot represent numbers that are smaller than 1 times 10 to the 18. So if you want to do like a fraction, like 0.2, you can't do that because the contract, you would need to represent a number in integer that is smaller than 1, which is impossible.
Yeah. I guess if this was getting ingested by a financial product library, couldn't they do whatever scaling they want in there?
They could, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. That's a strong argument for not adding zeros.
Cool. I'm going to keep it as is then.
So you're not adding zeros right now, or you are?
I'm not.
So it's like 2 means 2. 2 means like, okay, sounds good.
Set. Cool.
Okay, so that's a go as is. The next one was the Add iFarm Collateral. Now this one is actually two. This one is both a collateral and a price identifier. It's actually 2 UMIPs in one. Both files have been uploaded to the same pull request. So we kind of need that separated out. I've also not reviewed this in detail. Could someone else speak to this one?
John, I think you had some good comments here.
I think Reynes had even better comments, though.
True.
A lot of it, yeah. I was piggybacking on his comment threads.
Yes, I have mostly comments on how, just to clarify how to convert from this vault to farm token itself. But I think if we consider liquidity on this EFarm token sufficient on Uniswap, then that definitely solves a lot of problems and makes also this implementation price feed much more simple. It's also easier to manually find for voters whenever there's dispute, just less steps. So the main thing is just to decide whether or not this liquidity in Uniswap for EFarm token is sufficient enough.
Yeah, and I guess that was the bulk of my comments too, that since it's traded on its own and it's the actual token we'd use as collateral, we should just take whatever that token price is, even if it's deviated from what theoretically it should be based on the underlying value or whatever. Because weird stuff can happen with tokens, and you just consider the token itself where possible.
Yes, the only question is what's the comfortable TWAP period in that case, because still if liquidity is not very high, it's possible to manipulate, and for some time there might be some arbitrage opportunities open when you could just buy this iFarm cheaply and unwrap to this underlying asset and get some value out of it. Whether or not 5 minutes or another period, we shall have it here.
I think 5 minutes is very short. Should we suggest a longer time period? Most are 1 or 2 hours.
I think in other ones that aren't TWAPs for self-referential prices, we've used 15 minutes, which seems like, I mean, it's hard to argue for like a specific length of time, but 15 minutes is something that we've kind of judged as being sufficient previously.
Yes, but in any case, we have to remember that this is paired and translated from ETH to USD at the end of the day, and that's a spot price. So probably nothing longer for 15 minutes, because otherwise there might be some other issues if the ETH price is volatile for this period. So I think 15 minutes sounds good.
Okay. Now, the other issue that you raised, I'm sorry, I just totally forgotten. I didn't take note of it. It was that we should use the iFarm ETH pool. Was that right, Rainus?
I think that there was a need for a technical specification, just to rewrite this naming in terms of base versus quote currency and also collateral. I'm not sure if collateral currency probably is not needed anymore. It's yes. And some of the information in the market section was not needed also, like sushi swap is not used in actual implementation.
Okay, so is there any comments on the adding as a collateral type as well? We want these two separated out. But was there any specific comments in the collateral type one?
I don't think so. I think it's mostly about the price identifier part.
Okay, so that's a go with contingencies.
Yep. And I think the main contingency is just to use the value of the token itself and not do the sort of complicated valuing the underlying, asset thing that they're currently doing. So it can be simplified.
When you say use the value of the token itself, does iFarm actually have a dollar value?
So it does.
Yeah.
I was thinking like $1. I'm like, nope. But yeah, it does. Because it trades independently. So we want to go and look at its actual market price.
Have we talked about this already?
Market price.
Sorry.
Where would you get that market price? From CoinGecko?
I think it's Uniswap.
Yeah, there's a Uniswap pool.
What's the difference in liquidity between iFarm and the underlying farm?
Yeah, the liquidity for iFarm is significantly lower because it's new.
But I think it's like $1 million or something in the Uniswap pool, which is, in my opinion, okay, unless people are using a ton of iFarm on UMA or something.
Okay.
Okay, so we want that in two separate pull requests, and it needs a bit of tidying up of extraneous data. Okay, so that's go with contingencies. The next one was pull request 253, which, oh no, I missed one out here. 257. This one is the update the price identifier template, which everyone.
Is this like a UMIP though, or is this like a?
No.
So do we vote on this, or this is just sort of like a?
No, we can't vote on this.
Thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Good.
Very much a meta thing, but I am interested in case anybody has comments on it. But my thought was just UMIPs are getting there's a lot of redundant and unnecessary data in the current template, and so I wanted to cut some of that out and simplify it. So conceptually it gets at the same sort of things as the previous template, but just asks more direct questions and clean some things up.
Sean, as a suggestion, because I think this would be a useful tool or just a useful discussion for the rest of us to chat about, that maybe we table that if we have a bit of extra time after going through the actual limit.
Okay.
Okay, so we don't really need to discuss that any further at the minute. The next one was the Omnibus ERC one. Now, there was a couple of questions here over OHM and MIR. John, I think you wrote this one, didn't you?
Deepanshu actually wrote this one. He's on the call.
Sorry.
I was like consulting on it. I think I posted comments on it though. And I think that the way that we wanted to approach these is these are just meant to like glide some easy collateral types in. And so if there's any controversy about any of them, we just rip them out and we're not too emotionally attached. So I think that's kind of where we were at with OHM and with MIR. Although MIR, it's kind of a different issue because I don't think we have a problem with the collateral type. It's a problem with like UST and the way that we handle stable coins. And we're just going to circle back on how we handle stable coins, but rip it out for now.
Okay, so
but I don't know if there were any other comments on it.
On MIR.
And I think we're gonna. Oh, you said that. Never mind. And then you left updated final fees, right?
Yeah. So there's like some just to move them up or down to match the current price after all the volatility, and then also just make it nice round numbers.
Cool. Okay, so correct the final fees. And that's a go with contingencies.
Yep. Deepanshu, do you have anything else to add on these? Are you good to do those?
Yeah, actually, I was a little busy the last few days. I will make all the changes that you suggested.
Oh, you're coming through kind of soft. Oh, okay. Well, we can chat about it later. I think it's just having some mic problems.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Okay, well, we move on then to the Add punk-basic-price identifier. We had a few comments on that one.
And I think this one, I was chatting with Deepanshu about this. So the deepest liquidity pool is basically punk basic to NFTX. And so we would need to do this multi-step thing where we go from punk basic to NFTX and then do the spot price of ETH thing like we were talking about with other price identifiers. So I think we can just push these to next week to have some more time. I don't think there's a huge rush on getting this one through.
Yeah,
Okay,
I like that.
so we'll put that in as a no-go for further consideration. Yeah.
Yeah.
John,
Yeah, I
can
just need
you
to.
elaborate it a little bit. How are we supposed to go forward with it? So should we take a trap for NFTX and ETH pool, and then take the trap for ETH USD pool? So how should this all work?
Yeah, I think we do like what we were talking about with what was the earlier one we were discussing? Oh, I guess the CryptoPunk Index. So we would take a 15-minute TWAP of Punk Basic to NFTX and then take the spot price of ETH, because that's how that would work with the expression price feed. And 15 minutes should be short enough that it's not going to be way off on the ETH spot price, and it's also going to be long enough that you can't easily manipulate the other pool. So I think that's the way we would go about that.
Is there any risk associated with most of the liquidity being an incentivized pool?
I don't think so for Punk Basic, but I'll check on that. Is it?
Okay.
We'll look into that this week.
Okay, cool. So we'll delay that one until next week. The next one was the Punk Basic as a collateral currency.
I think we might as well push this one too, because I don't think we have any use case for it for KPI options or whatever. So it needs the price identifier to be useful.
Is there
Okay.
any reason why this was separated out from the Omnibus UMIP?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same question.
I think initially because we were doing the CryptoPunk Index type stuff, and we weren't sure exactly how we were going to do that yet. And there was a chance that Punk Basic would have been useful for that. Turns out it isn't really. So we could roll it into a future Omnibus UMIP also. So maybe we take a look at this and either expand this out with some other collateral types that we want to add, or if we're just out of collateral types we want to add right now, then we just consider this one separately.
If there's no blockers on this, you could also just roll it into this week's Omnibus, I think.
Oh, the collateral type, but leave the price identifier separate?
Yeah, I mean, there's only a collateral type Omnibus for this week anyways, right?
Wait, no, I think that there's price identifiers too. Are there not? Oh, no, it is just collateral types right now. You're right. Okay. That's a good point. So are there any issues with Punk Basic as collateral then? If not, then I agree. That makes sense. Just roll it into the Omnibus.
I mean, I don't think we have any problem for the collateral type, but if you want, I will just edit this and add to the Omnibus one.
Okay, you're saying if there are not any issues with it, you could roll it into the Omnibus?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool, that makes sense.
Sweet.
Just that, 253. Okay, so that will go in, but it will be added into pull request 253. Excellent. Now, the next one's the Vanguard Total Stock Market ETF. There were a few comments on this. I suggested it might be better to track the underlying index rather than the ETF itself. But there seemed to be a bit of a problem getting a ticker for that.
Are there regulatory concerns around the ETF itself and tracking an ETF?
I think it's perhaps better if we track a neutral thing like an index rather than an actual product.
Yeah, I mean, I generally agree with that. I was just like more curious around like, is there a regulatory angle that we need to think about here where like, I don't know, I know there's like limitations on what's considered a security and what isn't, and tracking an ETF may make this considered a security, whereas if you track in a group of many stocks and it's not a ticker in itself, that may not be considered a security. I don't know. I don't know if anybody like had thought about that or we talked about that, but it might be something we should consider in this UMIP.
Do we have Javapis on the call? Who was it? No one, the author isn't on the call for this one.
I think it is a concern though, and I'm not positive about this, but I believe ETFs are treated as securities.
Long ago in UMA's history, UMA launched a thing called US stocks. And one of the things that UMA tried to do in that was to make sure that the SEC's like make sure that we basically were not creating something that was inadvertently a security. And one of the ways we did that is like US stocks did not track the S&P 500, any S&P 500 ETF or anything like that. It tracked an index of like S&P 500 like companies that were many stocks. And as long as I think as you're above like 10 stocks, a group of 10 stocks, you're no longer considered a security. You're a derivative that you're just like a pure derivative. So anyway, there's like some SEC stuff around this, and it would only really matter in the US jurisdictions, but I think it's something that might just be worth considering here.
I think like mostly it's worth at least bringing this up to the author and having that discussion with them, because ultimately this is like their decision, I think. But also I think this is a good example of price identifier that should follow like the new pattern for self-referential price IDs. So breaking this up into two price identifiers and having one that's tracking VTI or whatever index is decided on, and then one that's tracking the self-referential price. So, sorry, Matt, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that sounds good to me.
So I think there's like other blockers other than just like the regulatory question. So like perhaps it's best to delay this and answer some of those questions and make that update for next week.
Okay, so we're going to push that one to next week to allow discussion with the author.
Does that seem like a good approach to everybody?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that.
Yep, sounds good to me. Cool. Okay. The next one was the variable expiring multiparty. Now, there was some discussion around this about how exactly you were going to do it using the optimistic oracle. And I see that there's been more comments left in the GitHub, but I kind of lost a bit of track. So would John or Matt like to update on how this has been resolved, if it's been resolved?
I just saw a comment to my comment. If you scroll down a bit, it looks like this was discussed in pre-launch governance about actually using the optimistic oracle to get the expiry price instead of submitting it as part of like this admin action to shut it down early. So is somebody from the pre-launch team here to confirm or discuss that?
So I don't think anybody from the pre-launch team is on. Might be wrong, but we discussed this on the last community call last Monday when you were out, John. And basically the way it was structured before was that an external DAO could call this variable expiry function and also pass in a price with that. And we determined that like a better design would be to call this variable expiry function and then have that request the optimistic oracle for the price instead. So those were the updates that were going to be made. And also the intention was that these contracts would get reviewed and deployed, and then we could vote on this. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think that's pretty cool and useful to be able to just call expiry early.
Yeah, I wonder if like
this contract's being deployed.
It doesn't look like it's been deployed yet. No.
Right. Okay. So we want to wait for the contracts to be deployed and then discuss this UMIP.
I think so, yeah. Also, the UMIP needs to be updated to explain that functionality that we talked about instead of how it is now.
Yeah, I mean, I think these UMIPs are a little tricky. I think what we should do is finalize all the comments on the UMIP, have everyone agree that this is that the implementation discussed in the UMIP is what we want, and then have the team deploy, and then put that address in the UMIP before the vote. And the reason this is a little bit tricky is because like deployments are really expensive with where ETH is and where gas prices are. So we don't want the team to deploy something if we're not like 100% sure that that's what we want to vote on. We don't want them to deploy something and then somebody be like, oh, that's like not exactly the right implementation, or we want to change something. So yeah, I think we should get this finalized and then kind of give the team the go ahead to deploy.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So are you now saying that we should discuss the UMIP before the contracts are deployed, Matt?
Correct. Yes. Yeah, exactly. I think we should have the UMIP like basically finalized, and then kind of do a like say that we're done commenting on the UMIP basically as a group. Kind of finish the review of the UMIP and then tell them to deploy. And I'm guessing that like this would probably mean they deploy a day or two before the vote. We'd probably be okay with them deploying like fairly shortly before we end up voting on it. And then all of the only thing that the voters should check when we do the vote is that they agree with the UMIP and also that the deployment matches the UMIP.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so have I really captured that? We're waiting until the UMIP is fully ready and updated, and then initiate the contract deployment prior to the UMIP vote.
Yep, exactly.
Excellent.
The contract address will be necessary in even doing the proposal. So like it'll probably need to be, the contract will need to be deployed at minimum like 24 to 48 hours before the vote, if not earlier.
Excellent. Okay, thanks ever so much for that, Matt. The next one was the Aragon KPI UMIP. There's been quite substantial work done on this since the last time we looked at it. There was a few comments, but I think most of them are actually resolved. Yep. I don't think there's really any outstanding comments.
So I had a few questions that might have been answered. Is anybody from the Aragon team on?
Yeah, I'm here, guys.
Hey, Ramon, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
So I was kind of struggling to understand the like cap on this. Like, is there a cap on the price for like how much one of these options is worth in the underlying ant?
Yeah, I replied this a few minutes or hours ago, I don't remember, but basically the cap price would be 0.1 ANT. Is the maximum that one option can be worth by the end of the reward program.
Okay. And like you don't actually list any sort of cap in like the pricing in like the final price, but that's achieved by capping like the total migrated assets that are counted.
Yeah, basically if we use the total, so the total assets that were migrated, first we have the cap of ANT collateral, which is 100K ANT. Then we have the cap of total migrated assets, which is the $100 million US, and the amount of options that are issued. So if we migrate $1 million US, it means that we are distributing all the 100K ANT divided by 1 million options. So this is the 0.1 per option as a maximum cap.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. And for the migrated assets, that's not just for the eligible DAOs, right? The eligible DAOs are just like the airdrop recipients. But
no, I added this. So we are calculating the migrated assets only for the eligible ones as well. So basically, okay, if other DAOs also migrate, this does not go into the calculation.
Gotcha. Do you have a finalized list of those eligible DAOs?
I can try to fetch one, but we are talking about 1,000 and something eligible DAOs. So don't know if it makes sense to put a list there of all of those. Is
there something you can link to potentially? I'm just wondering, if your price API was down and say we had to calculate this manually.
Fair. Yeah. The only, let's say, problem is you will have a list of V1 DAOs with their vault addresses, let's say. When they migrate, they are actually creating a V2 DAO, and they will send the assets to a new vault with a new addresses. with a new address. So we will have this information because they went through the migration, and this is what we are putting in our subgraph. But if this is down, there's no like proper way to do this manually at the exact time. But for sure, this will not like remain down. We need to have this up for things to work in general. But we could, like, I can try to create a list or something. And during the process, we can also have like a shared list of what are the DAOs that are migrating and the like matching addresses of a V1 DAO to a V2 DAO for sure.
I have a question. Would there be some events emitted on chain when there is this migration, or that's handled completely off chain, this migration?
I need to confirm this. I think we talked about an event, but the problem is that this event can be or not part of the migration, since it will be like an event for a new DAO being created on V2 as well. The actual migration information will be in our subgraph, like off chain, just so we can control for this reward program, basically.
My slight concern around the upper bound was that this is one of the first implementations of KPI options to go through, and effectively they run out, so that by the time the upper bound is hit, all the other options expire worthless.
Actually, when the upper bound is reached, it means that all the options are already distributed, meaning that if a new DAO tries to claim, there will be no options left to be distributed, and this DAO will not be entitled to receive anything.
So the options are given out at the point of migration,
Yes,
rather than the rewards being given out at the point of migration.
yes, exactly. So basically, when you migrate your DAO and you are like eligible, you can claim your options, and at this point we already like defined the amount of options that this DAO is entitled to. And like the DAO can say, okay, airdrop me these 1,000 options, let's say. If we get to the point where all the 1 million options are distributed, like if any DAO still migrate, it can migrate for sure, but will not be entitled to any options. So everything is already distributed and the cap is already reached, let's say.
Gotcha.
And when do the options expire into Ant?
The program ends on June 30th, which means that this is when any DAOs that holds the option can go there and claim the ANT.
Right, I understand. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So yeah, just to go back to kind of what we were discussing earlier, like one thing that I might ask in the UMIP is just a slightly more, even if some of the information is like not obvious or is difficult or even impossible to get on chain, I think giving like a step-by-step, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 way of calculating this, like the output value would be helpful. So like even if your API was down and the voters didn't have all the information, they could go on chain and do a little bit of like digging around and roughly figure out how to resolve it. Or the other option is like if y'all have an implementation of this API that you're hosting somewhere, like you could point at that and say like this is how our API is implemented, so that a voter could then like run that API themselves or something like that. But like I think some of the questions I asked in the UMIP were mostly due to like not seeing like a step-by-step explanation of how to calculate it, because I think your answers were like obviously like they made sense and they were perfect, but it was just like it wasn't clear from the UMIP how I might calculate it on my own.
Okay. I will add both things. So I will add to the UMIP the like step-by-step or on how this could be calculated, so anyone can do. And now we'll figure out if we can like link to the repository of this endpoint, basically, where anyone can take a look and see, hey, okay, this is how it works.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Does that work for you, Sean?
Yeah, that works for me. And I think contingent upon those two things, like this is pretty much ready to go.
Okay, so for that one, we have a go with contingencies. And what we're looking for is a step-by-step implementation.
Yeah, step by step on how to calculate the option price, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Any other contingencies?
And then, if possible, linking to the API code that's referenced.
The API code for the reference feed, for the data feed on Aragon.
Yep.
Cool.
One quick question. By when should I, what is the deadline for me adding this information on the UMIP?
So normally with contingencies, like we need to propose the votes anywhere from 48 to like 12 hours before the vote actually happens. And that's Thursday of this week. So by like end of day tomorrow would kind of fall within the timeline.
Okay.
Cool. Excellent. Oh, I've just put that in twice. Oh dear. And our last one, because 232 has been pushed to next week, is the UTVL KPI SGT price identifier. This is also carried over from last week. We still had a few issues. The formatting still hasn't been sorted out. And then there's a bit of confusion over the contents of the state contracts and the exact source of the data feed for the earn page, where they're suggesting that they get the data for the TVL. And there's also no specification for the dollar value. Is William on the call? Is William, I think. Okay, some of those are outdated. I don't think we've got anyone who wrote this on the call, but we do actually have quite a few issues still outstanding. And it's not entirely clear what is meant here. It has been simplified a great deal to specify the actual contracts, but there are quite a number of outstanding issues, especially the data feed.
Yeah.
Will we push this to next week to give them a chance to, or do you think we'd maybe get it in for this week?
I think it's kind of the same issues as last time, because I don't think a lot of them have not been addressed. So like some clarification on basically the pricing methodology is needed. Like Raina asked about, how to get the number of tokens staked in like each contract, which isn't explained in the UMIP. And then there's also like not direct instructions for how to get like the USD value of these pools. And I think those are things we talked about last Monday as well and decided to push.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that there's been some changes, but I think there's an awful lot of outstanding issues. So that was the price feed for the USD SGT. Clarification over the contents of the contracts. What else did you mention, Sean?
I think so. Maybe not contents of the contract, but how to get the number of stake tokens.
Yes, because they were mixed with reward tokens, so just to distinguish between amount of actual assets staked.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. We can push that to next week. Okay. I think we managed to get through it, and remarkably within the hour, which is
pretty good.
Yeah, it is. Is there any other issues that Andy wants to raise before we close the meeting?
Since we have a few extra minutes, I was just wondering if anybody had taken a look at the new price identifier template and had any feedback or thought that like this was a good direction to go in.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest. Let's loop back to that conversation.
Cool.
Yes, and I think it's
a lot of
really
red, which is
helpful.
nice.
Yeah.
What?
No, it's really helpful, I think, and much more clear, and especially if it's possible to put these examples from some prior price requests, then it's pushes also to think over this implementation section with actual data. So I think that's pretty cool.
I'm just really happy there's like way more deleted lines than there are added lines, which I think is like a really good metric that we should follow like a guiding light. No, but I mean seriously, like I think this drops a lot of complexity. Yeah, it just seems way simpler. And I think the old requirements were somewhat overbearing. So yeah. I also really liked that instead of like describing what people should do, you almost gave people like, it's more like a template this time, where like instead of writing out like this is what you should do during this section, you wrote like a sentence with like the pieces that people should fill in. It's just like a nice touch.
Yeah, Sean, this is Eric or EA Sports in Discord. I think from a very different, newer perspective, and someone who just went through the process for iFarm, I think it makes it more intuitive. And rather than having to watch the 30-minute video, I think a lot of your changes would be would enable someone who hasn't done it before to basically follow the steps as Matt said. So just reiterating, I think making it simple and more intuitive for folk who are helping out or trying to write their own as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. So I think, I don't know, it seems like we have general consensus to just merge this in and try to use this template moving forward for all UMIPs that aren't in right now.
Sean, I'd like to just add one point. Agreed with everyone's points pretty much. I tend to see UMIPs fall into two categories. One being the very straightforward, easy price identifier collateral type that should take a negligible amount of time to actually just write up and submit. And then there are these more complex, somewhat nuanced, interesting type of UMIPs. And I think your original template caters more for the more complex type UMIPs where we want to try and get as much detail. And this one makes it a little bit more simple to just get, the path of the course UMIP through. So just with that in mind, with us moving to having this simpler, more straightforward UMIP template, that'll help kind of with just the large number of UMIPs that we are putting through. But we should just keep in mind that when a more complex and a somewhat more meaty UMIP comes through, that the team that's going to be creating that can kind of give more detail. So I think this just kind of like lends itself to us just being a bit more communicative to much more complex to move.
Yeah, I agree. But I think the issue with like the old template was that it didn't fit into everything. So when it was like incredibly detailed in its questions and all of that, like asking for like a base and or asking for like, you know, price feeds didn't actually apply for like a ton of UMIPs, and it just confused people and like just create a lot of unnecessary information. So like, I think even for more complex UMIPs, my hope would be this would be simpler because it's not directing people in like the wrong directions.
Maybe there's an opportunity as time goes on to refine it. Chandler, to your point, obviously there's a need for some of the explanation or additional data elements for some of them. And so if we could define like criteria or guardrails based on X proposal, you know, if it needs a price feed or if it needs another element or explanation, that could be included in the template. I don't know if it's that cut and dry always, but I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Potentially even having like templates for different types of price identifiers. Like this is like the KPI options template or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
Excellent. Cool. Hopefully people should find writing UMIPs a bit easier in future then.
Hopefully.
Thanks ever so much for attending the call. It was good to see everyone and appreciate your time. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.